And we welcome you into a Football Tuesday edition of the best podcast available, episode number 36. I'm Jason Gibbs alongside Andrew Gribble. And coming up on today's program, we continue to get to know our front office and coaching staffs and our chief of staff today, as Callie Brownson will join us. Kevin Stefanski's chief of staff, very, very busy person in this time during this pandemic and trying to orchestrate everything and coordinate everything all from afar. So we look forward to sitting down with her. Gribbs, we have an episode today. We have an episode Thursday. Then we're going to be off for a couple of weeks, catch our breath a little bit. Everybody's going to be out of the building that was in the building. We're going to be out of the building. We've been out of the building. Who knows when we're going back in the building. But we'll get a few weeks off, and then the BPA will be back around training camp when that is supposed to start. We'll see what happens with that. Gribbs, I hope you had a good weekend. Last week, the one thing we did not get to, he talked the day that our podcast came out, and that was our head coach, Kevin Stefanski. Takeaways from Coach as he wrapped up the Browns virtual offseason program.
Well, I think the first thing was I like that he admitted that even though it was all virtual, we see it every year, but when it gets near the end of the offseason program, guys are ready to be done. And I think he acknowledged that even in the virtual setting, you could tell guys are ready to get on with their vacation, and I think that's good. I mean, that shows that they were working hard during this period. And I think the obvious thing that he acknowledged that I don't think a lot of fans understand is that this was longer than it usually is. And I think that they used that to their benefit in terms of what constraints they had on it, and it meant that they were able to have a lot more meetings. And I think that's something that they just don't get a ton of time with in the spring typically. Obviously, you lose the benefits of getting these guys in the field, but it does sound like, especially near the end of this program, when they really started to get a better grasp on the virtual thing and really found ways to really be engaging with the technology, I think they feel pretty good about where the offense is at, or even the defense in general. It's just now going to be a matter of how do you implement these virtual things, which aren't going away. Even when you get into a training camp setting, you're going to have a mix and match of both. But obviously the on-field work is going to bring everyone together, but then you've got to plan for basically the rest of it to be like what you've been doing during the spring.
Yeah, I mean, outside of training camp, the actual practice or the walkthrough that normally happens, before the practice, it either happens in the morning or, depending on when you're going to practice, it could happen at the end of the day. Outside of those two things, everybody's going to be apart. And I know that they're changing our building up to reflect that and, trying to figure out how to keep everybody at a safe distance outside of when they practice.
Yeah, Stefanski threw out the idea of potentially for your team meeting, you broadcast it into different parts of the building, which just seems so strange when you think about it, but it's just kind of the new reality that you're dealing with having a ton of people in a small space. You just got to be safe as much as possible. So I think it's just one of these things, though, that we're going to be following all the way up until the day that these guys report, because I just think the technology, the research is evolving, our knowledge is evolving, and just what implementations you can do. I think the testing is evolving. You're going to want to try to have the most efficient testing possible to get this off the ground. And again, I've said this before, the more we talk about all the stuff that's going into place with these NFL teams who have unified leadership, players having one kind of singular voice through their players union, I just wonder what is going on with college football, because this is a lot to work through from an NFL standpoint with kind of two clear sides working together on a common goal with not limitless resources, but a lot more resources than most colleges have. It's just going to be interesting to see how colleges can do this when the NFL is really, I wouldn't say struggling, but they're working through all the fine points to create the safest possible environment.
I think some of the other takeaways from Coach, obviously something we know inside the building that maybe, the rest of the media may or may not know, but just how, Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb work together. No one's got an agenda. everybody they're on the same page. They both of them just want to win, and they want to contribute to a winning football team. I think everybody's worried about how many carries, who's going to carry the ball how many times, and each week who's going to be the primary ball handler, or how are those roles going to be defined. But it definitely sounds like no one really in the building, and we've known this, again, no one really has a problem with that right now inside that building.
No, and I think that's a good approach to have. And we never really saw much frustration out of either of those guys last year during the second half of the year, even during kind of the losing situations. And that's where, honestly, that's where you get tested. I mean, because you're not going to go 16-0. So you're going to have some times when you go in with a game plan and it features one player and it doesn't feature another player. And then you lose that game, and it's on that player who wasn't featured to not get frustrated by it. Just because the team lost and you didn't get featured doesn't mean that there's an overall problem. I think it's about buying into the plan, and I think that that's kind of been what this spring has been about, is selling these guys on the plan, on the offense, knowing that just because if you don't get featured one week, you're probably going to be up next week. You just got to be ready when your opportunity presents itself. And the stuff we've heard from Kareem and Nick Chubb, I think there's some genuine excitement that they can make this work with two really good running backs on top of two wide receivers, a Pro Bowl tight end. And you've got a lot of people to feature, and it's just impossible to get everyone involved in kind of a balanced way each week. So it's just about buying into the concept, seeing it work, and then knowing that even if one week did not feature you and the result wasn't the same, that you'll be back up next week with a chance to win and produce.
Yeah. The other big note, obviously, Odell Beckham Jr. seems to be ready to go and will be ready for come training camp. Jarvis continues his rehab and continues to make strides, and things are looking good on that end. Obviously, the team going to take their time with them once we get into training camp, even though Odell is officially a full go. But he did say, like, it was one of the big reasons why they brought Rashard Higgins back on that 1-year show me deal. And it was the chemistry he has with Baker Mayfield and the fact that someone else is going to have to step up in that wide receiver room if, for whatever reason, Landry or Odell hit a speed bump here on the recovery.
Yeah, and it was last year at training camp, it happened when you didn't want it to, and that you really couldn't work in Odell and Jarvis as much as you wanted, and you ended up having guys on the first team that never really made the team even. I mean, Jalen Strong was with the first team for weeks, and he didn't even make it to the final cuts. And I mean, you've got, like, now going into training camp, even though Odell's back to 100%, you're not just going to throw him out there and be like, you're playing every rep here. I mean, and Jarvis is going to be limited through camp or parts of camp. I mean, he's coming back from a serious injury. So now you've got a bunch of young guys that you're going to be working in. And I think it is good to have that one reliable guy back with Rashard Higgins, who has a relationship with Baker Mayfield. You also bring back Damian Ratley, who's logged a couple good years from you. The key for him will be staying healthy during training camp. So there will be big opportunities for these young guys right away to contribute at that wide receiver position. But it is good to have. It's crazy to think this is Rashard Higgins' 5th year in the NFL coming up. I mean, he's now a veteran. So, I mean, he's going to be the older guy in the room and the older guy getting reps out there.
Yeah, definitely something to watch as we get into training camp. A lot of being made about the linebacker spot and, Jedrick Wills. How quickly will he pick up the whole left tackle thing? But that third wide receiver is going to be a pretty valuable component to this offense, especially if there's a hiccup, God forbid, knock on wood, with the top 2 wide receivers on your football team. That's a look at what's happening with the Browns. Time now for our interview of the week. And it's a chance to sit down with Coach Stefanski's chief of staff, Callie Brownson, a very impressive young lady who's already accomplished a lot, Gribbs, and someone that has a very bright future in this business and in this industry. And she's running things, and it wasn't so much a get to know because a lot has been made about her hiring, and we've gotten to know her, and she's awesome. And trust me, she is a very cool person to talk to and hang out with, but just how she's had to handle things here in the last 15 weeks.
Yeah, I'd say clearly the thing that jumps out to you is how organized she is and how on top of things, both with Stefanski and really the entire coaching staff in general. It's such a huge job. And then for Stefanski, I think he's known how to maximize what she's doing because he's done it before. So I think just an incredible experience that she's getting, and I think will ultimately vault her into what she ultimately wants to become as a coach in the NFL.
All right. With that, have a watch and have a listen. And here on the best podcast available, this is our get to know segment of the week. And we've been getting to know a number of the assistant coaches, the front office. Now we get to know our chief of staff, Callie Brownson. Appreciate a few minutes of your time, Callie, and welcome to Cleveland. I see that you are officially in your office while Gribble's in his panic room, and I am behind. I got fruit behind me. That's where I'm at in life. So welcome to Cleveland. You're officially in the office. And how have things been going for you here during this really crazy time?
Yeah, crazy is a good term for it, but it's good to be back in the office. It's definitely different. The atmosphere is a lot different than we left it, especially this time of year when this would be very busy for us, coaches in and out, players in and out. It's a different world, but at the end of the day, when all this happened, we pledged that we were going to make the most of it and get hard to work, and that's exactly what we've done.
If you can go back in time, and this is crazy because Jason and I talk about it all the time, is going back to like the combine when everything felt normal, I guess, in the world. And then kind of take me through what it was like when it's getting near March 9th, March 10th, and it's looking like that things are going to maybe be a little bit different here for a while. What was it like in your world over there?
So it's funny you say combine because I'm walking from the hotel to Lucas Oil and I'm listening. I got my AirPods in and I'm listening to a podcast and they're talking about everything going on with COVID-19 and the coronavirus and all of this speculation of how it's going to spread. We were looking at things that were happening over in Europe and obviously in China and so forth. And I'm kind of like sitting there like, oh gosh, this might actually be something. And then of course, from my perspective, from an operational standpoint, I'm already starting to be like, well, what are we going to do? But again, it was kind of just like thinking ahead, not really thinking any of that stuff was going to actually affect us in the way that it has. And as we got back and we're still in our mode post combine and doing the things that we need to do from a coaching staff perspective, evaluating these prospects, every week that seemed to creep closer and closer. It was like this impending, like, this is real, and it's going to affect us in a big way. You started to see, major cities around the U.S. starting to shut down restaurants, retail stores, and all that stuff, and it became extremely real. And for us, it was immediately straight to, what are we going to do about it? And I sat down with Coach, and we said, if we have to run this offseason program in a way that's never been done in the history of the NFL, how are we going to do it? Not just how are we going to do it, but how are we going to do it better than 31 other teams? We're a new staff. First-year head coach. We're trying to get our bearings. We've made a lot of changes, obviously, on the roster, a lot of new faces on the team just in general. We had to find a way to be the most innovative team to do it virtually. And that was a challenge that I took very seriously. He took very seriously, and our entire coaching staff took a lot of pride in facing that challenge head on.
How differently do things look during the final week compared to week one, just from a virtual standpoint?
I mean, just like everybody else, we're all more comfortable. That first couple weeks, getting people on, getting people logged on, getting them comfortable with the different tools that we were using to go over installs and watch film. It's almost like second nature now. In the beginning, you're sending out a lot of messages, making sure everything is as clear as possible. And, a credit to our players who really bought in early. They bought in super early. And understood that this was the atmosphere. And, I tell Coach all the time, what a sense of pride we have in the guys that we have on this roster, especially because of how they treated this virtual offseason program and buying in. And now it's like second nature to them. They're almost like, I know how to do that, which is great. And like I said, when you're put in a tough, adverse situation like that, attitude is everything. And I would say that between our coaching staff and our players, the support staff, our IT video department, everybody had the best attitude possible to face the challenge of doing this better than anybody else really in the league.
Callie Brownson, our guest, the chief of staff for one, Kevin Stefanski of the Cleveland Browns, and so much more than that. So you're going through all these things. You're new to Cleveland, and then your coach, our head coach, is in Minnesota. He gets stranded there. What were the challenges of being his chief of staff when you can't see him except on a Zoom call.
Yeah, and I think at face value, you look at those challenges like, sitting down in a room with you, we can get a ton of stuff done and we can, hammer out a bunch of these tasks. But, you know, I think nobody is a stranger to the fact that, Coach Stefanski is a phenomenal communicator. And that helped me a ton. I tried to, step up, level up basically in my communication to ensure that the time that we got was as productive as possible. And he's a phenomenal leader, and how he's led myself, how he's led this coaching staff, how he's led this team through the whole process and navigating a pretty difficult time. He never seemed fazed by it, and that was exactly what trickled down to everybody else is this is what it is, and we're going to make this as productive as possible. So if it's me getting him for 15 minutes on a Zoom call to tackle what really could take an hour and a half, we got it done, because that's just the way he operates, that's the way he communicates, and that's just the way he approaches those things.
I know you guys are nearing the end of the virtual offseason program, but what are some of the things you and Coach are kind of walking through now as training camp gets closer and closer?
We're just preparing for every possible scenario we can. We have to be ready to roll, much like what we did with the offseason program. We're going to get dealt a certain, deck of cards, and we've got to be ready to roll. And again, we've got to be ready to roll as a new staff and get things done, and make sure that our players are assimilating into, not just the system, but the culture, getting them back in the building, hopefully, and doing those things. We want to establish that culture that we've been trying to build all offseason program, and now doing it in person when you actually do get to establish some of that rapport and do what you need to do. So what we're doing on the front end right now is just trying to prepare for absolutely any possible scenario that could come, and make sure, we're vetting every facet of those details to make sure we're being efficient. And most importantly, we're keeping our players and our coaches and our staff as safe as possible in that process is extremely important to us right now as well.
And obviously the NFL is ultra competitive. Everyone wants to do things the best possible way in their own buildings. But is this such a unique situation where you are taking tips from other teams or trying to find out what they're doing and maybe picking up some of the best things, practices you've heard from, or is it still kind of you do your own thing and figure it out on your own?
I think it's a mixture. I think, like you said, this is a learn from each other kind of league. I think we're all curious because all of our situations based off of facility setup and accessibility to fields, everybody's situation's a little bit different. You almost have to be unique and have some individuality in how you approach your strategy. But yeah, I mean, we're all trying to figure out how everybody else is going to do it and try and be most efficient. And again, like the biggest part about it, I'll talk about winning football games and all that stuff because it's extremely important. But right now, more than anything, it's about, who's coming up with the most innovative practices to keep everybody safe. Like that's really what we want above all. Nothing matters if we can't keep our players safe, if we can't keep our coaches safe and healthy. Those things are super important. So I would say there is a lot of talk and collaboration around the league on best safety practices as well.
First full-time female coach in Division I history. Last season, an intern with the Buffalo Bills. And a plethora of years either playing football or coaching with some of the best. What's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten as it pertains to this and eventually where you want to go in terms of coaching?
I heard this from my professor my senior year of undergrad, Charlie Casserly, actually, who's no stranger to the NFL, was actually my senior seminar professor at George Mason. And he, at the top of our every day we had class, he would actually give us a detailed itinerary. And at the top of it always said, what did you do today to help us win? And in the beginning of the semester, that meant football games, right? Or baseball games or whatever it may be. At the end of the semester, he clarified on that message that winning is in the little moments. Winning is in being more efficient, finding ways to be more organized, helping coaches get more prepared. Winning is in finding that little detail, that you spent 2 extra hours in the film room trying to find. Winning is in becoming a better communicator with your players and those things. And so that's my biggest piece of advice. And I actually have it plastered right next to my desk on a piece of paper. What did you do today to help us win? How did you add value? How did you make us a better organization, a better football team? How did you help Coach Stefanski do his job better? And I think when you have that attitude, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter what that facet is, you're not only contributing, but you're growing. You're tasking yourself to grow and to get better. And that's really what football has always been about for me, is adapting, growing. And that's kind of the way I approach every day.
What's maybe the best bit of feedback you've gotten though since you took on this job, and what's maybe the best thing you heard from maybe some people who are aspiring to be in the position you're in now today?
I think one of the biggest things that I try to reflect as well is and I think we're doing a good job, and I want to talk for women across the league as well in this regard. One of the biggest things is, oh wow, they accept you. It's almost like a seamless transition for you to be a part of the staff. I think there's such a perception outside of this as there's a female on staff and so forth. But again, you're brought on, you're hired to bring value and to bring something to the table. The second that you do, your seat is at the table, period. And I think that's what I try to reflect all the time is this is not an abnormality. This is a great addition that can happen to organizations and teams. And I try to reflect that. And there's been a lot of great feedback. And I think that if I can continue to inspire women to not be intimidated or shy to chase after a dream or a goal like this, just understand that once you earn a seat at the table, you do have a seat at the table. You earned it. You're there. Keep growing. And it's really a great opportunity once you get there.
I'll ask about your specific position. What's the one thing that's surprised you most about the chief of staff position?
I knew coming into it, there'd be a lot of collaboration around the building. I guess I didn't know how much, and here we are. And I love it. Honestly, it's my favorite part, I would say. I think sometimes football gets kind of cut in half. You have football and then you have the business side and all these things. And for me, especially in an organization like this, where it's what our ownership really believes in, is cohesiveness. It's been a pleasure for me to be able to work across the board with everybody. How can we make the Cleveland Browns better? Like, obviously the job has its tasks of, how are we being a more efficient football team? How are we doing these things? But how are we making the organization better? How are we making the culture within our building better? That's been, to me, my favorite part, is to get to know everybody around the building, to help contribute in a way that we're getting better as an organization every day.
All right. You played safety, you played running back, you played slot wide receiver. What was the best position you played?
I liked free safety the most. And that's controversial because I had fun doing everything I did, but there's something about playing safety and just getting to be an athlete, crack some heads, and make quarterbacks scared to throw deep on you. I loved that a lot. It was one of my favorite things. I learned a lot about the game of football playing that position just as a whole bigger picture. And I just got to have fun. Wide receiver is fun. Running back is a lot of fun. Returning kicks is a lot of fun. But I kind of liked being, let off the belt and ready to roll, and just get to play football and have a little bit of fun. Those are some of my favorite memories.
Okay. Do you see yourself trending more toward the defensive side of the football, the offensive side? I know you did some special teams work in Buffalo as well.
I love it all. And one of the things Coach Stefanski will tell you, and I couldn't agree more, is be as multifaceted as possible. And that's kind of my goal with everything. Last year in Buffalo, I had a lot of special teams experience, and I was very offense focused as well, which was great. The pass game stuff comes very naturally to me. It's very easy for me to absorb. And I got to grow a lot in run game, pass protection schemes and so forth. So I grew a lot in that time there. And I want to make sure that I don't become very singular. Coach Stefanski says it all the time. He has so many stories of times where he was picking the brains of the defensive coaches in Minnesota. No matter what position he was coaching, didn't matter. He was finding a way to really make sure that he was doing the best he could to be as well-rounded and multifaceted as possible. That's my goal. So, once things slow down, if things slow down, I'm looking forward to bouncing around a lot of meetings and understanding who we are through and through as an identity, special teams, offense, defense, whatever it may be. That's my goal over the next couple of years.
How quickly do you have to get to know a coach when you take on the position of chief of staff, and how quickly is this relationship between you and coach just kind of had to take off because you guys are so intertwined in everything you do there?
Yeah, very quickly, but I would venture to say, like, in our first few conversations, we clicked pretty quickly. We saw a lot of things very similarly as it pertained to culture, as it pertained to kind of what this role was going to entail, especially his first year as a head coach. It was a pretty smooth transition for us to understand each other. And we spent a lot of time, around each other those first few weeks. There's no doubt about it. And at Combine as well. So, it's not hard to figure a lot of the different details about him. But we talked very openly. He's always been extremely transparent with me about his envisionment for this team, what he wants, again, from schematics all the way to culture. He's very transparent because, there are times where I kind of have to make sure that some of those visions are coming to fruition and we're moving in the right direction. So, as somebody who's done this job, he knew how important it was for us to be clear and on the same page with that so that I could help in whatever areas I could to make sure those things came true.
And now just how much easier is it, or is it even easier at all that you guys are now in the same area, same building? I mean, how much does that change?
It's great. Like I said, we made it work and we did what we had to do and we made it work, but it is nice to be able to actually talk in person and hammer out some of these to-do lists, because as you can imagine, you sit here, you start a task, and you're like, I got to ask him this real quick. We got to figure out what we're going to do here. It's nice to be able to walk with my mask on to his office and talk to him and hammer out these details and get rolling. So instead of having to say, I sent you a Zoom invite.
Callie Brownson, the Chief of Staff for Kevin Stefanski. Appreciate a few minutes of your time. Enjoy a little downtime over the next few weeks. Now, by downtime, I mean you're probably working from vacation, but enjoy a few minutes and a few days of sunshine. And we can't wait to all get back in the building. And hopefully in a month and change, we're all going to be taking part and getting ready for the 2020 regular season. Appreciate a few minutes. Continued success to you, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks to Callie Brownson for her time, and we hope that she's getting a little bit of downtime. As most of the coaches, it appears, Gribbs, everybody's going to step away for a couple weeks, catch their breath, come back ready to go about mid-July, and come back ready to go for the 2020 season, no matter how long it may end up becoming.
Yeah, and I think these coaches they'll check out a little bit, but I think their eyes and ears are going to be on the latest developments on what they might be doing, what they're going to be facing from a coaching standpoint. This isn't going to be a normal training camp. It's not going to be a normal season. So I think they're going to be paying attention to the latest developments and just seeing what all they're going to have to do to get ready for this training camp that we hope is a once-in-a-lifetime experience and we can go back to normal in 2021.
Yeah, it's going to be next week. A lot of us are on vacation. And by on vacation, we're hanging out in our backyards, for lack of a better term. But, knowing our luck and the way things have gone, we'll get some developments next week.
Yeah.
We're off, but we're with an eye and an ear to what's going on around the league, as hopefully we get some clarity in the next couple of weeks as to how we're going to approach things and how we're going to move forward for the 2020 NFL season. Gribble, Cam Newton is a New England Patriot. Shocking development as we go around the league here. The biggest question I have is, why did it take so long? Because it's not like you can get into their facility and have a physical and meet with their team docs and everything. And they waited essentially till their virtual off season was over. So why did this take so long?
I really don't know. And I think it is interesting because you basically miss all the virtual off season. So I guess there was no real rush. If you couldn't get him in for the final 2 weeks, maybe there wouldn't have been as much progress there. But it makes sense now to get them ready and get a plan in place for training camp. And I just have a hard time believing that anyone other than Cam Newton is going to be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots this year. I think he is so clearly the best quarterback in that room, especially if he's healthy and ready to go. And I'm excited. I think that I bet Josh McDaniels is excited because I think he's only 31 years old. You get him back in healthy standing. This is a talented, kind of a freak athlete at the position. And of course the Patriots got him. It just makes all the sense in the world. And I know there's some people who still say that Jared Stidham could still have a shot at winning this job. Maybe he does. I wouldn't bet on it. So it's just going to be a different looking Patriots offense. But now we have to go back and look at the tape between what me and Zagura talked about with the Buccaneers and Patriots, but I feel very good about siding with the Patriots in whatever we discussed, because I think that they're in great shape, and I'll pick them to win the division again.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'll put that in the folder for later this week when Zagura rejoins us. I just don't know about the talent around him. I like Sony Michel. Is he ever healthy? Can he stay healthy? What's going on with that wide receiver core? Does he have the weapons around him to make him successful? Because I don't think the Cam Newton we saw early in his Carolina days is the same Cam Newton. Even at 31 in his, quote, prime, I worry that he get the job done with that surrounding cast.
I can agree with that, but then I'm going back and looking at the receivers that he had in Carolina, and Cam Newton had a really good season in 2017. And I mean, I'm looking at this receiving core, and it was Devin Funchess and Kelvin Benjamin, and Ed Dixon, and he had Christian McCaffrey. That's not all that much. I mean, none of those receivers are still with the Panthers for reasons, I mean, that go in line with their production. And I think that Cam has not exactly been flush with Pro Bowl talent around him outside of Greg Olsen. So I just think that I put faith in the Patriots system to figure out a way to get the most out of him. And they figured out a way that maybe the Panthers couldn't when Newton was dealing with those shoulder issues, that, when Tom Brady lost a few yards on his deep ball, they figured out ways to maximize what he could do, and still ran a pretty efficient offense. So I just, again, it just feels so Patriots to get a former MVP on a minimum deal. I shook my head at the signing, and that is a seal of approval for what they're doing.
Yes. I mean, that's it, and if it blows up in their face, it blows up in their face. They end up with a high draft pick.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
The worst case scenario is Jared Stidham's your starting quarterback, which is what people thought was the plan for the last 3 months.
Yeah, exactly. And if he's good, great. If he's bad, well, it's a pretty big quarterback class coming out next year, and you could have a top 10 pick if he's bad.
And this is a Patriots team that still has a defensive player of the year on their team, Stephon Gilmore. They're going to be really good on defense again. Like, I can't put the Bills in the throne of the AFC East until they slay the beast that is the Patriots. I just can't do it.
No, I can agree with you on that. Will Zagura? That's to be determined.
We'll see.
I look forward to that debate coming up on Thursday. We want to thank Callie Brownson for her time, and we wish her continued success as she moves up the ladder in the National Football League. And just a great person, and we think big things are ahead for her. But we're happy to have her right now on her staff.
Talk about a resume booster this year has been for her.
Yeah.
I mean, to say you were basically the organizer of all this she's handled it so well, and I think Stefanski has talked about that a lot, and just the kind of the communication, the adaptation to all the technology. I mean, this was something that you maybe saw coming a week in advance, but then when it's there, all of a sudden you had to hurry up and get organized, and she's done a heck of a job with it.
She has, and props to her and all the coaches that have worked through this, and the players that have been a part of the virtual off season. We'll do our virtual off season awards as we wrap up the off season best podcast available, coming your way Thursday, as Zagura will join Gribble and myself. Thanks to Jeff McDaniel for all of his hard work as always. Thanks for watching, and thanks for listening. Make sure you log on to clevelandbrowns.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Like and subscribe today to the best podcast available. You can also check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Browns. We will talk to you again on Thursday. For Andrew Gribble, I'm Jason Gibbs. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the best podcast available.